Hey, what's up, comrades? We're on to the next little arc. It's a Magneto arc, another one. I don't know why this thing I used, the torrents of the X-Men comics, doesn't separate some of these arcs. This is like very clearly a thing, and when they do like Wendigo was 2 issues, and this is like a 2-issue arc, but whatever. So the Return of Magneto. It's another Magneto arc. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, and comment. And we begin with issue 149, where Professor X is musing on Magneto after we were reintroduced to him in the last issue when Cyclops and Lee found up on his island. And we just get like a little backstory on like all the adventures with the X-Men. And then Kitty rolls on in with roller skates and one of the most ridiculous costumes you will ever see. And if you had forgotten when she phases through electronics, this reminds us, which is very good writing because it comes up a lot in the next 2 issues, that she completely destroys electronics and causes a lot of problems. And so Professor X kind of loses it and demands she leaves because she messed up all his work and he's not to be disturbed when he's doing stuff. Meanwhile, the rest of the X-Men are out in the danger room fixing it up. And Aurora makes some funny comment about the land of America, where even she can become like a revered African goddess can become a mechanic. It's good stuff. There's some good political commentary in these next couple of issues, I gotta say. Anyway, Kitty shows up. She's not really paying attention, so Storm hits her to kind of wake her up from her like sadness. Kurt grabs her, tosses her to Wolverine, and Wolverine passes her to Peter, and they're all laughing and kind of jovial at this point. Then Professor X calls them and sends them out to search because there's some signs that Magneto might be around. Wolverine and Peter are playing poker in the back, and Peter's destroying Wolverine. Aurora's thinking about Angel, who's not a member of the X-Men anymore. He still hasn't returned. And then Wolverine's like, I got a present for you. And he goes, aha! And he opens a closet door, and there's Kitty. And Aurora's like, I have the mind to turn this around right now, and blah, blah, blah. I'm an X-Men too, and whatever. Anyway, they head back into the volcano base the X-Men were trapped in a long time ago when they had like the nanny and everything. They break their way in. It looks, pretty decent for an abandoned facility. But they find Nanny. Wolverine destroys it completely because he's still mad. Aurora tells him to calm down because everyone's pissed. And then they separate to kind of see what's going on. Aurora gets spied on by our old friend Garrick, and then we get a flashback of Garrick, another flashback, and how they were in the Savage Land. They fought this guy who was the living monument or something. It's not a living monument. That's the Pharaoh. But anyway, he had stone powers and stuff, and she was going to save him, but then she didn't. And he's really hard up about it because, I don't know, like it wasn't her fault, but he really wants to like throw her down a cliff because she didn't save him after he tried to kill her. What an asshole. Kitty and Colossus are wandering around, and then Colossus gets beamed in the back of the head, and it's Garok, and he's like half crazy monster and half stone. Magneto had forced him to guard this place and attack anyone who comes by. So Kitty jumps through him, which stuns him for a second. She then grabs Peter, but then Garok bashes in the side of the wall, which causes the lava to flow. Colossus is going to be okay. Kitty's also going to be okay because she can phase, but Storm senses the change in pressure or something, and summons like a blizzard to freeze the lava and all that stuff. At that point, Garrick throws a frozen Colossus at her, knocking her out. Wolverine and Nightcrawler find the knocked out X-Men and then hide because Garrick's back. And he senses Nightcrawler and so uses some sort of like light magic to disorient Nightcrawler, who then jumps on his head and punches him, and then he throws Nightcrawler, and then Wolverine starts attacking him, and he's healing. Meanwhile, Kitty is trapped in the lava/wall, holding her breath because she's, she can't breathe if there's no oxygen, even if she's like incorporeal. Anyway, she finds her way out, and she gets super mad. Garok is creating a pit to throw Storm in, like he was thrown in, not by Storm. But Kitty shows up just in time to wake Wolverine and Nightcrawler up. They throw Kitty at Garrick to like stun him. Nightcrawler grabs Storm, but it's not enough. Garrick still throws her down the pit, or he falls down the pit with her. It was a little kind of confusing what was going on. The lights go out, but Kitty has a flashlight for some reason, and she goes down to rescue Storm. Garrick comes up behind her. She's able to like shimmy away from that douchebag. And then summons Nightcrawler, who grabs Storm and teleports out of there. At some point, Kitty, because she like jumped through him again, it like stuns him enough so that he falls into like a deep pit into the lava and is gone forever, ? Anyway, Nightcrawler teleports himself and Storm out of the hole, which almost knocks him unconscious, but Peter's able to grab him, rescue him and Storm, and then everyone recover, and the issue ends with Wolverine having a beer. Not quite though. So go back to Cyclops, who's wearing like fantastic armor, and Lee, who's dressed like I don't even know, Namorian princess. And they're like, oh, you know, blah blah blah. We'll take care of this, and we'll figure out what's going on, and we'll be okay. And then Magneto rolls up, and he's like, Cyclops. Cyclops is like, what? He's like, you can take that stupid blindfold off. Your powers don't work here. Dun dun dun. The next issue, 150. Wow, 150 X-Men episodes. Look at us. Starts off with Magneto telling everyone in the world that they're going to fucking denuclearize, stop fighting each other, and spend their money on helping the poor. And for some reason, Cyclops has a real bee in his bonnet about this situation. Like, I get all these terrible tyrannical governments that we have in the world. Even in the 80s, they were all terrible and selfish and not really there to help any of the citizenry. And Magneto calls him out on it and says he's going to destroy the governments if they refuse to oblige. But then Cyclops gets really butthurt about it. And then Lee is like, what about freedom? And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. You're not talking about individuals, you motherfuckers. He's talking about governments fighting each other. Quit being assholes. Magneto is 100% in the right here. Like 100%. And then he's like, who's this girl? Where's Jean? And Scott's like, well, she's dead. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. She was a great nemesis. And Cyclops is like, whatever. You don't know my pain. And Magneto's like, how come you've never met another Magneto on the entire Earth? Because we were all killed in the Holocaust, you dumb shit. Like, I've lost more people than you can imagine. So stop being an asshole. Meanwhile, the Ruskies launch nuclear torpedoes or missiles out of a sub. Magneto deflects that, destroys the sub, flies to Russia, blows up a whole town, and is like, don't fucking do this again. And rightfully so, I feel. And Cyclops and Lee are very sad about it, which I would be like, fuck them? This sounds like the 1980s. There's literally a Cold War. Whatever. Anyway, so Lee and Cyclops kiss Hippopotamus, and the Blackbird gets shot out of the sky behind them, but they don't notice it. There's some flying around with that, trying to recover the plane, yada, yada, yada. They end up crashing in the water. Nearby, we get introduced to Carol Danvers, who's with Moira, Peter Corbeau, and Professor X. Now, Carol Danvers is Miss Marvel, and she is excellent. This is before they ruined her by making her Captain Marvel or whatever the fuck they did later. But she's so good. And she's a member of the X-Men for a while. So we're actually there's some issues we're going to follow that are kind of just like her doing shit. Because she becomes a very pivotal member of the X-Men, despite not being a mutant later on. Okay. Down with the Blackbird, everyone escapes, and they're able to breathe because they have these breathing devices. They only brought 4, or they had 5, but then 1 got destroyed. And so everyone's good except Colossus, who can breathe with his metal. Unfortunately, they enter like the disinhibition field that Magneto set up, and now he can't breathe, and it looks like he passes out and dies. Back at Magneto's base, Lee is wandering around at night after presumably having sex with Cyclops. Because they're in a bedroom together and they're both pretty naked. But then she decides to go for a little walk hippopotamus, and she gets assaulted by Wolverine, who drags her into the water by the little island base. And then she sees everybody getting dragged up, and she's like, oh, you're the X-Men. Scott told me about you. And they're like, oh, Scott? Cyclops is here? Good, we were looking for you guys. Meanwhile, Kitty and Wolverine have to do emergency CPR, and they bring Peter back to life. Thank goodness. He's good. Wolverine then rushes ahead and almost stabs Cyclops in the chest. And it's like, oh, we're back. And everyone hugs it out. And then Wolverine talks about, everyone's kind of like, oh, chagrin, blah, blah, blah. We learn that none of them have their powers, which doesn't affect Wolverine's claws, which is new because previously it was kind of theorized. Previously, as in like the 1970s, 80s. When this was coming out, it was theorized that the claws were part of his mutant powers, but they're clearly not based on what we're seeing now, which means his adamantium is also not part of his like mutant powers. That being said, they kind of retcon that later, it seems. Like he has bone claws at some point, so they are part of his mutant powers. But I don't know. There's a lot of back and forth on it. It's irrelevant. It is what it is. So the X-Men decide they're going to try to defeat Magneto with their like regular powers, which is like Scott's strategery, Nightcrawler's aerobatics, Wolverine's claws, Colossus' strength, and Aurora's thieving capabilities. So the men separate from the women. The men go to destroy this device that's causing the earthquake. Oh, that's right. He destroys the Russian city with an earthquake-making device. Meanwhile, the ladies go and they find a computer system, and they're messing around with it, and then Storm finds Magneto, and she's like, oh, I have to kill him. But she can't do it because she killed once as a child and refused to ever do it again. Meanwhile, while she's having that conflict within herself, the X-Men destroy this device, and there's a lot of like shenanigans there. Like Wolverine and Nightcrawler are balancing. One almost falls. There's tossing. There's jumping. Storm is like really freaking out about killing, and she finally decides like I have to do this. And then Magneto wakes up, tosses her out the window. Supposedly, he thinks he kills her. And then Xavier, who's not within the disinhibition zone or whatever, a psychic attacks Magneto. back with Xavier on the little boat with Peter and Moira and Carol, we get, and Carol looking fine as hell, boy. She's got one of those, like, she's got the shirt, but it's all tied up right around her breast. And what Xavier doesn't realize is that Magneto's grabbing his chair that he's sitting on and dragging him off to his palace. And everyone's like, no. And then the ship crashes, or the electronics all go out or something. Meanwhile, the X-Men finish destroying the device, but Magneto shows up and fixes it instantaneously because metal magic. He's also captured all the X-Men except Storm, who's dead, quote-unquote dead. She's not. She continues to be the best X-Men by climbing up and out of the, like, she fell out, she grabbed onto a thing, and then she goes and she destroys the computer that Kitty was working on, which frees the mutant powers. Magneto doesn't realize this as of yet, so Cyclops, waits for the right opportunity, and then the battle with Magneto begins, and it's pretty cool. It's like fight Magneto, hit him with this, blast him with that, he's fighting back, they're fighting back, psychic attacks, blow this. Kitty sneaks off to destroy more computer stuff, to like sink the island, or to, not to sink the island, but to make sure he can't like function anymore. Casting volcano magic all over the world, and she's successful. Magneto freaks out, flies up and blasts Kitty, which almost kills her, and then he finally has like an existential crisis. He's like, wait a second, I killed a child. And almost killing like a 13-year-old girl, which, I mean, Iceman was 16. It's really not that big of a difference. Maybe because she's Jewish, they have that in common. So I don't know, mutant Jewish girl, I don't know, right? It's like, he doesn't really get into it, but he remembers his daughter, maybe because it's a girl, and fuck Iceman. The Twinkie son of a bitch. Anyway, so Minnie was like caressing her and holding her and like being sad and like having second thoughts about everything he's ever done. And then Storm shows up and he's like, please kill me. I don't deserve to be alive. And she's like, no, you need to figure out what to do with yourself. I'm not going to be the one who makes that judgment call. Now give me the child. And meanwhile, all the other X-Men, they show up, everyone's good, Kitty recovers, and they're all having a good time. Then there's like a cute like Star Wars reference where Kitty is like, I'm going to raise the ship with my mental powers like a Jedi, and then she gets thrown in the water for being like a dork. And yeah, there you go. That is the Return of Magneto arc. He wanders off to do whatever, eventually turns himself in and comes back later to join the X-Men or fight it. There's a lot of back and forth with Magneto, but this is great because he becomes a much more nuanced character than he has been in the past. But yeah, there you go. Cool. Let's go ahead, like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you all later.